Okay, we've got a cross-text connection or a paired passage here, and we'll always check the question first. Based on the texts, how would the author of text 1 most likely respond to proponents of the philosophical stance outlined in text 2? So not just text 2 in general, but especially the proponents of the philosophical stance. So let's keep that in mind as we read text 2. So, philosopher G. Moore's most influential work entails the concept of common sense. He asserts that there are certain beliefs that all people, including philosophers, know instinctively to be true, whether or not they profess otherwise, explaining that among them that they have bodies, that they exist in a world with other objects that have 3 dimensions. Moore's careful work on common sense may seem obvious, but it was in fact groundbreaking. Okay? So Moore believes in common sense, right? I don't want to prove that we're not materialistic or people don't exist, some strange philosophical ideas you might have heard before. He just says, if it's there, you see it, you touch it, it's in the world, it's 3-dimensional, it's an object, right? Okay. Text 2. What are the proponents of the philosophical stance? External world skepticism is a philosophical stance. There we go. Supposing that we cannot be sure of the existence of anything. Yeah, that's kind of what I was just talking about, right? Outside our own minds. During a lecture, G.E. Moore once offered a proof refuting this stance by holding out his hands and saying, here is one hand, here is another. So this is our author from text 1 basically saying, I got a hand, I've got a hand. You know, you're philosophically telling me it doesn't exist, it's only in my mind. But here are my hands. Many philosophers reflexively reject this proof. Such and such called it an obviously annoying failure, but have found it to be a challenge to articulate exactly why the proof fails. So they can't disprove it, yet they reject that proof. And there's something not exactly right about that either, quite frankly. So what's going on here? What would text 1 say about the proponents of the philosophical stance? He would say they're wrong. I can prove otherwise. Now, his proof's not necessarily agreed upon, but he believes, text 1, Moore believes he can prove otherwise. So probably not agreeing, probably not even suggesting. He would definitely argue. And he might point out, I don't know, it depends if it's pointing out negative or positive, let's see. So by agreeing with those proponents that Moore's treatment of positions that contradict his own, so we first off have to think of this as the author himself of text 1 is not Moore himself, okay? So yeah, it's somebody third person just discussing Moore's common sense philosophy. Okay, so that author might therefore not just simply negate the philosophical stance. He might actually question whether the proof is effective or ineffective, or take account of the counter claim to the proof, or at least the potential rejection of that proof. So by agreeing with those proponents that Moore's treatments of positions that contradict his own is fundamentally unserious. Okay, nothing here says he's not serious, right? That's just not in the text at all. So, okay. Would the philosophical approach people suggest that an instinctive distaste for Moore's position is preventing external world skeptics from constructing a sufficiently rigorous refutation of Moore? Well, they can't get a rigorous refutation of Moore. That's true. They are unable to do that. But what's causing that? By an instinctive distaste for Moore's position. Is it because of an instinctive taste for Moore's position? I don't think so. That doesn't sound right. I don't think B is going to be correct as a result. Okay, C. By arguing that if it is valid to assert that some facts are true based on instinct, it is also valid that some proofs are inadequate based on instinct. Well, yeah, I mean, they couldn't actually prove that his proof was wrong, but they do find it challenging. They instinctively say this is not right. So would the author of text 1 most likely respond to proponents of the philosophical stance by arguing that if it is valid to assert that some facts are true based on instinct is also, I'm not sure that's what he would argue. I mean, that does seem true, but I'm not sure that's what he would argue. Let's keep going. By pointing out that Moore would assert that external world skepticism is at odds with other beliefs those proponents must unavoidably hold. That may well be it, right? So what would the author of text 1, who was outlining Moore's common sense philosophy, he might point out that Moore would assert that world skepticism, which is, let's call that the second philosophy, the philosophical stance, everything's in our mind, is at odds with other beliefs those proponents must unavoidably hold. That, hey, here's my hand, it's actually there. And they have to explain it away, and they couldn't sufficiently. I'm going to go with D, actually. I think D is probably what text 1 would say to the proponents of the philosophical stance. So C is true, but I don't think that's something that text 1 would say to text 2. So I don't think that's right. D is the correct answer. Okay, we got text 1, text 2. We have to sort of connect the text or paired passages. Let's read the question. How would the author of text 2 characterize the theory in text 1? Okay, so that's pretty straightforward as the descriptions go. Let's see what the theory in text 1 is. Because literacy in Nahuatl script, the writing system of the Aztec Empire, was lost after Spain invaded central Mexico in the 1500s, it is unclear exactly how meaning was encoded in the script symbols. Okay? Although many scholars had assumed that the symbols signified entire words, linguists such and such theorized in 2008 they signified units of language smaller than words, individual syllables. So, okay, basically Spain took over in the 1500s, the Aztec Empire went away, and the meaning of their language went away, and it's unclear whether their symbols meant words or syllables. Nothing here says they were actual letters like we use. Okay, so text 2. We want to know what text 2 would think of this syllable theory. The growing consensus among scholars of Nahuatl script is that many of its symbols could signify either words or syllables, maybe both. So this is saying both, depending on syntax and content at any given site within a text. For example, the symbol signifying the word hoopy, blouse, in some contexts could signify the syllable pill, in others, as the place name Chapultepec. Thus, for the Aztecs, reading required a determination of how such symbols functioned each time they appeared in the text. So it wasn't just one or the other, it was both, and you had to understand how it worked with the other parts. That's what text 2 would say, not as simple as text 1 is making it out to be. So praising, no, it wouldn't praise. Arguing, maybe not arguing. Approving, probably not approving. Cautioning, that's almost certainly going to be it. Let's read that one first, actually, because I think he's going to caution that it's not as simple as text 1 says, by cautioning that the theory overlooks certain important aspects of how the script functioned. That's it. So we're not always able to get it from the verbs, but in this case, we definitely are. More often than not, we get it from the paired passages, the verbs. They can be a better indicator. Text 2 did not praise the theory for recognizing the script symbols could represent, that's just the symbols could represent entire words. He wouldn't praise that, and he didn't, right? By arguing the theory is overly influenced by the work of earlier scholars, that's just not in the text, okay? By approving the theory's emphasis on how the script changed over time, no discussion of its change over time, other than it kind of went away after the Spanish took over. That's not it either. D was definitely the correct answer. Okay, paired passage. Let's read the question, figure out what we need to find out. How would text 2 respond to the claims in text 1? Pretty straightforward. What are the claims of text 1? That's what we want to find out as we read it. Digital art, the use of digital technology to display images, isn't really art at all. So the claim is not art. Okay. It doesn't require as much skill as creating physical art, painting. With a tablet and stylus is much easier than using paint and a brush. The technology is doing most of the work. Okay, so digital art is not art. What would text 2 say to that? Probably that's nonsense, is my guess. So arguing, explaining, insisting, admitting. I think we're going to shoot for arguing, but so far I'm just speculating. I'm guessing. Let's actually read text 2. The painting programs used to create digital art involve more than just pressing a few buttons. So yeah, this guy's saying it's more than just, some simple button pressing. It takes more skill, in other words. In addition to knowing the fundamentals of art, digital artists need to be familiar with sophisticated software. Many artists will start by drawing an image on paper before transforming the piece to a digital format. So they'll actually do the regular art, where they can apply a variety of colors and techniques that would otherwise require many different traditional tools. So the idea here in text 2 is, no, it really is art. It does take skill. So A, text 2 would argue that a piece of art created digitally can still be displayed traditionally. No, that's not it, right? It wasn't about how it can be displayed. That's not the right argument. Text 2 would explain that it's actually much harder to use a tablet. No. He doesn't say, again, false comparisons. He says it's technically needs skill, but not that it's harder, okay, than to use a paintbrush. That's not it. False comparison. That's wrong. C, by insisting that digital art requires artistic abilities and skill, even if it employs less traditional methods. Yes, its methods are different, somewhat different, but somewhat similar as well. And it does require artistic abilities and skills. C is going to be correct. Let's just check D. By admitting, well, text 2 does not admit or give in to text 1, that most digital artists don't think fundamental drawing skills are important. No, that's just nonsense. Okay? D is wrong. C is the correct answer. Okay, we've got a paired passage again. What would the paleontologist in text 2 most likely say about the researcher's initial thought in text 1? Okay, so we're going to get a thought, an early thought here in text 1, and we want to know what the text 2, the paleontologist, would say about that. Okay, so paleontologist think, that's probably going to be key. A tiny, unusual fossil in a piece of 99 million year old amber is of the extinct species such and such. The such and such fossil consists of a rounded skull with a thin snout and a large eye socket. So it's got like a big eye and maybe a thin snout. Maybe it's a bird-like or something like that. Who knows? Okay. And because these features look like they are avian or related to birds, researchers initially thought that the fossil might be the smallest avian dinosaur ever found. I thought birds were actually dinosaurs, but whatever. Okay, that's the thought, right? The initial thought is that this fossil that looked like a bird is maybe a bird, right? Okay, and we have a dinosaur bird. Okay, let's see what paleontologists say. I'm going to guess they're going to say dinosaurs are birds, so of course it's the same thing. I'm again completely guessing just based on my own flawed limited knowledge, but anyway, let's read it. That's what you're supposed to do. Paleontologists were excited to discover a second small fossil that is similar to the strange such and such fossil, but has part of the lower body along with a bird-like skull. So here they got the body too, right? Okay. Detailed studies of both fossils revealed several traits that are found in lizards, but not in dinosaurs or birds. Therefore, paleontologists think the two creatures were probably unusual lizards, even though the skulls looked avian. Okay, text 2 says we've got a lizard. Text 1 says we have a bird. So, what would text 2 say about text 1? You didn't have enough information, therefore you made a wrong connection or assumption. So, understandable, possibly confusing, probably not. Flawed, yes, because they didn't have the extra information. reasonable. I mean, it is reasonable, but they didn't have the, so let's read the answers. It is understandable because the fossil does look like it could be related to birds, even though such and such is probably a lizard. Yeah, that's pretty much what they would say, right? It's understandable, but it actually is a lizard. Let's keep going. I'm going to hold on to that one for now. B, it is confusing because it isn't clear what caused the researchers to think it might be. No, we know what caused them to think it was a bird, the snout. Okay. C, it is flawed because the researchers mistakenly assumed that such and such must be a lizard. No, that's actually false to the text. The researchers thought it was a bird, not a lizard. So this is completely mixing up facts, and it's false according to the text. Another typical wrong answer choice. Watch out for those mixed up facts. D, it is reasonable because the such and such skull is about the same size as the skull of the second fossil, but is shaped differently. What? No, that has nothing to do with it. And that doesn't make it reasonable. That's just not discussed in the passage at all, really. The first and second skulls were bird-like skulls. They were similar. It's just because of the body, they realized, hey, this is actually a lizard. The correct answer is A. They understood why they thought it might be a bird based on the skull, but once they had the body and everything else, they realized it's actually a lizard.